lifelong truth. Color me the poetry of nothing but the truth.
Color me a love child lost in the promised land. I am a poem for black hearts going to meet the man.
I am not to be sold nor bought. So color
Hi,
me
welcome to
scum.
Color Me Poetry. I'm Danny Queen, poet Danny Queen, if you will. And today we have the young, beautiful, lovely young lady with us today. And she is the director and host of the Cress Welsing Institute, Miss Sabrina Johnson. Welcome, Sabrina.
Peaceful greetings. Thank you.
What is the Cress Welsing Institute?
The Cress Welsing Institute is a think tank and a learning laboratory that Dr. Frances Cress Welsing developed and conducted for nearly 30 years. Dr. Frances Cress Welsing being the preeminent psychiatrist who unlocked the keys to the colors.
Keys to the colors.
Yeah.
Wow.
In that she helped to decode what racism is. The
White
system of
supremacy.
White supremacy.
And she says it's a global system.
Yes, yes. She, along with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr.
And who is he?
Oh, he is an extraordinary gentleman who's here in the Washington, D.C. area still. He, back during the Korean War,
Brilliant.
yes,
Brilliant gentleman.
he did a lot of thinking about racism, about what was happening back in the United States when he was on a radar site on a mountaintop.
In the 50s, in the
Yes,
1950s,
in the
yeah.
early 50s, yes. And so he began to just ask questions. He was sort of in a quiet area. There wasn't a lot of interaction that he had, so he had plenty of time to think.
Deep
to
thinking
ask
at that.
questions.
Yeah.
Yes, very deep thinking. And he
Wow.
wrote his thoughts and questions and ideas and analysis just on handwritten pages, just handwritten
Wow.
notes. And he amassed over 1,000 pages of notes.
Wow. And when I think about Mr. Fuller and Dr. Wilson, it's like they changed a lot of people's lives, including my own, with their theories. Something to think about. So the institute is if you will, the right arm of Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, her creation.
Yes, indeed. You know, as a general psychiatrist and a child psychiatrist, she, of course, affected lives directly and was devoted to lifting up black people and helping them to attain good mental health. And she recognized when she took histories of patients that they always would talk about racism. Somehow racism was impacting their lives. And so as a conscientious psychiatrist, she wanted to do her best in order to help black people get well. And so in addition to her interaction with patients, she wanted to extend the reach of her theory and her practice
Now you
to
know
the
this.
community.
Now I'm sorry, but you know the story that she told us about the subtitle to the ISIS papers, "The Keys to the Colors."
Yes.
Would you tell that story?
Oh, sure, sure. And, you know, a part of being a good problem solver is listening.
Yes.
Listening
Being a good doctor,
generously
part of it is listening.
and patiently. And so she was working in a clinic in Washington, D.C., and apparently there was...
St. Elizabeth.
well, at that time...
Oh, this
I'm
was
not
before then?
I'm not sure that it was St. Elizabeth's at that particular, at this particular time, but she was told that, well, there was a young man who was brought to her who was, quote unquote, creating a disturbance. And he was talking kind of, as we would say, out of his head. But she decided she was going to listen carefully and see if there was something that he might say that could give her an indication of what was really going on with him, so that she could help him. And he rambled on and on for a long time, but she listened very carefully. And in the midst of his ramblings, he said, "Doc, if we could just figure out the keys to the colors."
Wow.
And it really just struck her at that moment.
It struck me when I saw the book. I said, "Keys to the Colors." I said,
Yeah,
"Lord
so
have
that
mercy."
became the subtitle of her book, her seminal piece, the ISIS Papers.
Now, before the ISIS Papers, there was the crest theory.
Yes.
We
yes.
we're a little ahead of ourselves, but it's all good because it all connects.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about the crest theory and the importance of the crest theory in the 1970s with Dr. Frances Cress Welsing.
Yeah, so Dr. Welsing was born in Chicago, the south side of Chicago. She was the second of 3 girls born to...
The Cress girls, she said.
Yes, the Cress girls. Born to Miss Ida Mae Cress, and who was a school teacher, a public school teacher in Chicago, and Dr. Henry Noah Cress, who was a physician, a surgeon, in fact. And she went to Antioch College in Yellow Springs, Ohio. And then when she left there, she came to Howard University Medical School, and that's where she got her medical degree and began teaching there. During the time she was teaching, she was on the heading the pediatrics department at Howard University Medical School. And she encountered Mr. Fuller. You know, again, she had reasoned that she really needed to get a deep and thorough, comprehensive understanding of racism. And some sort of voice within told her one day to go to a Black Power meeting, and she went. And she heard a voice in the corner of the room say, "Racism is a system." And again, it really piqued her interest. And she met Mr. Fuller, and that began about 50-year journey, working through reasoning, analyzing what this thing is, and what we as Black and other non-white people must do to eliminate
the global majority.
Yes, to eliminate the system of racism, white supremacy. So, again, once she grasped the ideas that Mr. Fuller presented, and the central idea was that racism, white supremacy is a system, a global system that impacts all areas of major areas of people activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. And so with that, again, being a psychiatrist and a problem solver seeking to assist Black people who need a lot of help.
To understand the system.
Yes, yes.
And that it's a global system.
Yeah, yeah. She said, well, if indeed people who classify themselves as white structured this global system that impacts all areas.
And they did.
Why would they do it? So she
brought the why
that
to
seed,
it.
that deep seed of inquiry,
So,
that critical question, why, in her mind.
So would it be safe to say that Mr. Fuller said this is the system, and then she said, why? I mean, why would they do such a thing? Why would they build such a thing?
Exactly.
It's like hand in glove. His theory and her theory seems to come together. I mean, it's interesting the way those two theories came together. And here we are today, all these years later, and they have made a tremendous impact
Absolutely.
on the world.
Yes, yes.
In terms of racism, white supremacy, and how to fight it. In other words, counter-racism.
Exactly. And so when she asked the question why, again, in some quiet time, as she was washing her dishes, and it occurred to her, you know, what is it that white people say? They always talk about Black people and other non-white people as being
inferior.
Minority.
Yeah.
The minority.
Yes.
Call us minorities. Yet we know.
With global majority.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All over the world. When you look at the map or the
Yes.
globe, spin it.
People of
and
color
pick-
of the
yeah,
majority.
all over the world. And so the other thing is that people who classify themselves as white were always talking about Black people's intellect being inferior, their genetics. Something was
yes.
wrong with them at that fundamental level. And being a psychiatrist, she was familiar with the mental mechanism of projection. You know, when people are troubled by something deep within themselves and aren't really willing to acknowledge it, oftentimes they'll project it on to someone
Other
else.
people, yeah. Something
Yeah.
wrong with you.
Yeah.
One finger pointing at you and 3 pointing back at them,
Exactly.
as my grandma would say.
Yes, and so as that that was her, you know, aha moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that, she expanded. Well, the other critical piece is, and you know, we learned this in high school biology, and certainly in medical school she knew as well, just classic genetics.
Yes.
That white is a recessive trait.
Gene.
That doesn't mean inferior, it means recessive. It means that in the presence of black color, the product, when those come together, black plus white, the product is color. Brown plus white, the product is color.
Wow.
Red plus white, the product is color. Yellow plus white, the product is color. And so reasoning that people who classify themselves recognized it, you know, once Columbus started circumnavigating the world, you know, everywhere he landed, it was colored people.
People of color.
Yes.
Wait a minute, put a pin right there, because Public Enemy, PE, says fear of a black planet.
Exactly, and that's where she concluded. Because if, in fact, there was just mixing
Yes.
with all populations in the world, with the numerical ratio as it is, with
Yes.
non-whites being at least 9/10 of the global majority population, coupled with the fact that white is a genetic recessive
gene
trait.
Yeah.
If everyone just mixed it up, and just like when you put a drop of chocolate syrup in some white milk and stir it up,
Yes.
you no
And
longer
they'll
have
be white
white
again.
milk.
It's that simple.
Yeah, and so reasoning that people who classify themselves as white figured this out, because in traveling long distances by boat and landing someplace and staying there for a while and having relations with
If they stay for
the
12
women.
months.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
9 months.
Oh,
or
9
so.
months. Okay. You know better than I do.
And the women were impregnated through those encounters. The babies came out looking like the mother. And so if, in fact, all of the men of color all over the world got in their boats and sailed north to Europe,
Did the same
or
thing.
whatever direction they were
Yes.
coming from, north to Europe, and mixed it up, sexually speaking,
Yes.
white would disappear. And so this system, this global system of power, domination, and control by people who classify themselves as white is in order to prevent white genetic annihilation.
Wow.
So the fear of that is the basis for the behaviors that we see all over the world, not just now, but for centuries and all over the world.
So all of this brings us back to the crest theory,
Yes.
the basis of the crest
Yes,
theory, as we
yes.
see on the screen. The crest theory, and talk about the art on the crest theory of that little small book
Yes,
with
yes.
the big
Yes.
black circle. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
so you see the circle, and it's black,
Yes.
and then in the center of the circle is a tiny white dot. And so symbolically or image-wise, graphically, that is a representation of this globe, of the earth, from a demographic perspective. And it, you know, the black represents the people of color, the non-white
Wow.
global majority, and in the center is this tiny white minority.
It may seem oversimplistic, but that's a very powerful image on the cover of that publication.
It
Of the
is.
crest theory, and that came out in
70.
1970. Wow.
Yeah, she wrote it. She wrote this paper and published it while she was teaching at Howard University, and that didn't go over too well with those who were the major funders of the university.
I want to stop right there, and we'll pick up after this. I'm going to share this piece as tribute to my mentor, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, Keys to the Colors, 1935 to 2016. The crest theory of color-conscious compensation are the keys to the colors of white genetic annihilation. As Queen Warrior, scholar, counter-racist, Black Gold Pearl, she gave us the key to unlock the love of self for a whole new world. Her color-conscious confrontation made her one of a special kind. Public enemy number one, the psychoanalysis on the front line. The cause and effect of the iconic ISIS papers is a master key to decode the white psyche on the chessboard of white supremacy. White fear rules in all areas of human core to the core. Economics, education, imitated law, politics, religion, sex, and war. The fear of the future is nothing simply to be taken for granted. As a white minority, 1/10 of all people on the planet, keys to the colors. And this is the time I just read part of it. Yes.
That's fabulous. I mean, that's an encapsulation of the work.
Let's pick up where we left off. We were talking about the response to the ice, not the ice phase, but the crest theory at that time with Howard.
Yes.
It created a storm, if you will.
Yes, yes.
It wasn't a quiet storm either, y'all.
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't on HUR.
True. So Dr. Welsing heard through the grapevine that she wasn't going to receive tenure and promotion. And so she went to the dean and expressed concern about that and inquired. And he basically said that, yeah, that's right. And she said, well, why?
Yes.
Because of that paper you wrote. And she had only published
and what paper was that?
It was the Crest Theory of Color Confrontation. And she was told by him that it didn't make sense for her to say that white people fear genetic annihilation.
Wow.
And so she stood her ground and had to leave Howard University at that time, medical school.
And she was a professor at Howard at that time.
Yes.
Yeah, to put it bluntly, they fired her.
Yeah, well,
that's all right, but she stood up for what she believed in.
Yeah,
that's the point.
But the point is also that the system of racism, white supremacy, impacts everywhere in all institutions and organizations, etc. Even those that are, we're all victims of racism, white supremacy, and whether we're in a black organization or an HBCU or wherever, we're
it's
all
global system.
under this system of white supremacy at this time until we understand what it is, how it works, and what we must do with our own individual behavior to eliminate it. And we work then on producing a system of justice to replace it.
All over the world.
All
a system
over the world.
of justice.
Yes.
And also, I remember Mr. Neely Fuller saying at one time, at one of the lectures, he talked about the 8th area. He said, no cohabitation between white and non-white until there's justice on the planet.
Yes, sexual
That's the 8th area. Yes. Because
if you think about it or do a little bit of research, if you're not already aware, there was a lot of time, energy, and resources put into regulating sex.
Wow.
Especially sex between people who classify themselves as white and people they classify as non-white. I mean, when you go to the Smithsonian Museum of the National African American History and of African American history and culture,
and not just in the South.
Yeah. If you look at their exhibits concerning laws, they have a state by state sort of excerpt of laws
and codes, black codes and stuff.
Yes. It's particularly during the Jim Crow era and on up until fairly recently.
Willie Lynch, Uncle Sam, and Jim Crow.
Yes.
They're brothers.
Absolutely. Blood brothers, you might say. But if you look at the categories of laws, there might be a couple laws here in this category, but there's a whole slew of laws around miscegenation in all of the states. So there was a lot of time and energy put to that. And as we know, a lot of by the thousands that we
understands the reason why. Yeah.
Lynching.
Lynching is a part of that.
Yes, absolutely.
Big part of that.
Absolutely.
And of course, you familiar with the new lynching museum down in
Yes, Alabama.
Alabama.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes, I'm
Yeah,
looking
it
forward
just
to
opened this year.
visiting.
Is that right?
Yes, I'm
Yes.
looking forward to
Mm.
going there.
Now, as we look at some of the pictures on the screen, I like to see the magazine, the Black Child.
Oh, yes.
Yes, because we're gonna see some beautiful pictures of Dr. Wilson, and of course this is one of them. Talk about this, the Black Child Journal.
Oh, yes. Dr. Welsing was a lifelong board member of Black Child Journal, the National Rites of Passage Institute. And once Dr. Welsing passed, we were requested.
Now, when did she pass? Because we didn't mention that.
Oh, January 2nd, 2016.
Wow, we're near that time now.
Yes,
So it's been a
Yes.
couple of years.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes. Unbelievably.
My mentor,
Mhm.
your mentor, millions of
Absolutely.
people mentor.
Yes, life-changing. Yes, and Dr. Usini Perkins reached out and asked if I could do a piece to include in this edition that was a special edition devoted to Dr. Welsing.
Oh, wow.
And so there are a number of articles and poems, papers, etc., by a host of people.
Would you like to read some of your piece? I mean, if you're prepared to.
Okay.
This will
Well,
be-
I wrote a piece about the institute.
As we look at some of the pictures
the Cress
on the
Welsing
screen.
Institute of Psychiatry and Social Research.
Okay.
Unparalleled mechanism for learning, healing, and problem solving. The Cress Welsing Institute has its roots in early discourse between Dr. Welsing and Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. during the time that Dr. Welsing was working at Howard University Medical School. And I talked about that a little bit earlier.
Okay.
I'd like to say, let's see. Okay, anatomy of a meeting. And again, so the Cress Welsing Institute, we meet at Howard University still, and we
Every
did
second
since-
Thursday?
Yeah, every second Thursday of the month from September through June.
How long have we been meeting?
Close to, well, it's probably over 30 years now.
I ain't that old. I ain't that old.
I'm not even. It started out at Harambe House, Howard,
Yes,
the Howard Inn,
Hotel,
way back when, and then moved to Howard University. But it's free and open to the public. It's an opportunity for members of the community, anybody who's interested, to
Can
come
come.
and talk about one subject and one subject only.
No fee.
Understanding racism.
That's the whole purpose of the Institute, which
Yes.
is a black think tank.
Yes, it
Mhm.
is.
Please share
Yes, and so
as we look at more pictures.
Yes, each meeting began with a lecture by Dr. Welsing, who frequently used the blackboard to illustrate her concepts, to reinforce crucial points, and to leverage the power of visual imagery to amplify the lessons. She detailed how she arrived at her analysis captured in the Cress theory, always paying tribute to Mr. Fuller, whom she referred to as a genius and one of the most important thinkers of the 20th century and beyond. Dr. Welsing also highlighted some of the most intriguing ilations associated with the symbols and the symbolic activities described in the ISIS papers. So I hope people will purchase and read the ISIS papers.
Yes, by all means.
With Dr. Welsing's understanding of racism, white supremacy, and what motivates the behavior that we see worldwide by people who classify themselves as white against the people that they classify as non-white.
Yes.
Once she really had a full understanding of that, it unlocked something further and deeper in her mind, and she was able
And in
to,
us.
Yes.
In fact, we the Welsonites, y'all.
Yes.
Welsonites.
She was able to decode symbolic images.
Imagery, yes. Oh, man.
and
For instance,
everything.
for example,
And,
ball
and,
games?
and also principles and activities in the society, things that we take for granted, secrets that are hidden in plain sight.
yeah.
So yeah, she talked about ball games.
Wow.
And so again, if in fact the people who classify themselves as white are concerned about genetic annihilation, then their focus would be on the genetic package, the black male genitalia.
Talk about
particularly. Well,
because she talked about it in the ISIS papers.
Yes. So the
in depth.
When you look at the color spectrum from deep dark black all the way up to very, very, very light.
Matter of fact,
white.
Matter of fact, at one point she said most black, most beautiful. And did she? She explained
Yes.
what she meant.
Absolutely. So when you look at that color spectrum, the one that has the most potential to genetically annihilate, meaning the most color, the deepest color package, would be the dark black male. Now, let's back up, because the black male and the black female have equivalent genetic capacity to genetically annihilate white. Because, of course, black females and other non-white females have color as well. And the color is genetically dominant. However, females cannot impose sexual
Yeah, that's what I'm going
intercourse.
to talk about. I was going to say talk about the physiology and how important that is.
Yeah, yeah. Females can entice and persuade and all of that sort of thing.
Yes, all
But
females can do that.
If a female were to try to impose her will, for instance, with a weapon, to say, okay, you're going to have sex
Do what I
with
want.
me. Exactly.
Yes.
And the male becomes frightened, then
Nothing
will
happens.
happen.
Yes.
And that's just basic physiology. And
Human
erection
physiology.
cannot be
Yeah.
maintained in the presence of fear. And so with that, it is the black male who is the principal target by the system of racism, white supremacy, because he possesses the most potential to genetically annihilate and has the capacity to impose sexual intercourse. All males can
He can melanate the world.
Yes, yes. All males can impose sexual
But only the
intercourse.
black male can help melanate the whole world.
Yes.
So he's the most threat.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
And that's why we see what we see in behaviors by people who classify themselves as white with regard to black people.
But
and
that's
other
why
non-white
counter-racism is so important to those of us who realize and who are conscious of it. We have to have a codified consciousness, as Mr. Fuller would say.
Yes, yes, a code. It's just a set of behaviors. It's what you do and what you don't do, what you say and what you don't say. Like there are codes for everything. Electricians have a code that they follow. There are certain things they do and certain things they don't do.
Of course. And that brings me to that book you have there by Mr. Fuller, as we look at more pictures here.
Yes, yes.
Wow.
The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept.
Yes.
And
Talk about
this is the expanded and revised edition
And
that
then-
he did in
Now that came out
2016.
Oh, 2016. Okay.
But originally it was published in 1984. And this is another aspect of the very intriguing and delightful relationship that Dr. Welsing and Mr. Fuller had over the years, because, you know, once she heard his analysis about
racism,
white supremacy being a system and global and affecting all of these areas, and reading through some of his 1,300 to 1,500 pages, just handwritten sheets of paper that he used to carry around in a suitcase.
It used to be bigger. He made it smaller.
Yeah.
You could put it in your purse now.
Yeah, she was dedicated to helping him publish this.
Yes.
She and one of her colleagues at the medical school.
Who was a doctor as well?
Yes, Dr. Carl Hutchinson. He also was impacted very positively by Mr. Fuller's ideas, and he committed to assisting in publishing the document. And he used to type. Back then, we didn't have word processors and
we didn't have
laptops.
desktop.
But he committed to type
Wow.
this 1,300 pages
Wow.
and type up the manuscript between surgical rounds.
And it took a long time.
Yes. So Dr. Welsing and Mr. Fuller worked together, and it took actually 17 years.
Yeah, I remember her saying it took 17 years.
Yes, but finally, Mr. Fuller published the United Independent Compensatory Code System concept.
I also remember her saying that if it takes me 150 years, black people and people of color around the world are going to be able to understand racism, white supremacy, what it is and how it works.
Yes. And we have to take up what she always characterized her work as her cosmic assignment.
Yes.
And
She
we have
always
the
said that.
same.
Yes.
We have the same because the system is still present, it's still active.
Yes.
It's treacherous, it's barbaric,
As ever.
it's savage, it's wicked, it's all of those things. And we must eliminate it. It is a system of terrorism. The
Injustice.
system of white supremacy is a system of terrorism.
And you know, she did say that was her cosmic mission, but that also brings me to the fact that my part in it, and it was my cosmic mission to be there for her and to record everything that she said for almost 30 years.
Yes, and we can't give you enough accolades, Danny, for having the vision to capture her interviews, her presentations, her lectures, her conversations,
Yes.
so that we have a catalog to draw from. In her own words.
Yes, in her own words. So people can't
words.
say, well, she said this. No, we have live recordings so you can actually hear what she said herself.
Exactly.
And that's the beauty of it. But I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm just saying that was my cosmic mission, to be there for her.
Yes. And we all, those of us who have been diligent about participating in the Cress-Welsing Institute over the years and years and years and years and years, as we have and many others who are still meeting. We are still doing this work and helping others in our families, in our neighborhoods, in our workplace, etc., understand what we're dealing with. Mr. Fuller's statement, which in my view is the most profound and important statement ever made in the history of history. He says, if you do not understand white supremacy, racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you.
What does that mean? Because there's somebody sitting out there watching saying, well, what does that mean?
That means that you can have mastery in a particular area. You can be top of the line. You can be the top pediatric neurosurgeon in the world. But if you don't understand racism, white supremacy,
the system that's in place,
what it is and how it works, you'll be confused. And through that confusion, you will be behaving in ways that are detrimental to your own self and to the well-being of all of your fellow non-white victims. And we see that all over. Now, let me stop and say this, that we're all victims.
Yes, we are.
And there's nothing wrong with the word victim.
Some people might have a problem with that word victim,
but a lot
but
of people do.
It is what it is.
And a lot of people who will say, who will
Challenge.
urge you not to label yourself a victim,
But that's what it is.
They will benefit from that, because if there's no victim, there's no perpetrator, and then there's no problem to be
but
solved.
there are some of our own people who will say, well, victim, why I got to be a victim? I ain't no victim of nothing.
Yes, because we have been conditioned to believe that a victim means something bad, and you shouldn't label yourself that. But embrace the reality of it, because if you don't think that something is wrong, then you're not going to devote yourself to changing or to fixing a problem that you think doesn't exist. So victim just means something happened to you and you need help and you're reaching out. If somebody, if you get in a fender bender,
yes,
when you call your insurance company, you're not using the words, excuse me, I've been a victim of hit and run. But that's
what it is.
In essence, what you're
Yes.
doing.
You might not use those
that
words.
language.
Yes.
But that's what you're doing. Something happened. Now I need help.
Help, yes. Brings me to a short poem I like to share, simply entitled Drenched in Black Blood. Lynched by Uncle Sam, Willie Lynch, and Jim Crow, white supremacy is drenched in black blood from head to toe. Drenched in injustice.
Blood, yes, yes. And we see all over the world
Yes.
blood shed by the millions upon millions upon millions by people who classify themselves as white against people that they classify as non-white. I mean, pick a place. Anywhere on the continent of Africa, anywhere in the United States, throughout Central America, South America,
wherever
Australia,
black and people of color
all over.
Yes.
Think about the genocide. Think about the murders.
And I remember also Dr. Walsing saying that wherever you go in the world, and she spoke all over the world, wherever you go, the people who are the darkest always at the bottom.
Yes, yes.
You think that's by accident? No, that's by design. That's the system doing its thing.
Yes. Interestingly, because a lot of people will say, well, it's just human behavior, and if it wasn't this group trying to dominate, it would be that group. No, it's different, because if that was the case, then in some places you would have black people on top, or the darkest people on top, or you would have situations where the darker you are, the more benefits you have. But we have consistency throughout the world that the stratification, basically, as we learn, if you're black, get back. If you're brown, stick around. If you're yellow, you're mellow. White, you're all right. So that's the color code that says black is the worst.
Do you remember once when she said she spoke, I think it was England, and she said this thing that we all grew up with, if you're black, you know it, go ahead.
Oh yes, when you're black, get back. If you're brown, stick around. If you're yellow, you're mellow. White, you're all right.
And she said everybody in the audience knew it.
Yes, yes. I remember going to college and being in a setting with, an international setting. Black people from the Caribbean, from England, from various countries in Africa. Everybody knew that. And even if people don't specifically know that literally, we know it.
Yes, we know it. Everybody knows it.
Conceptually. Absolutely. And we have unknowingly embraced that, or not knowing its origin, we've embraced that. You know, a lot of black people were told, don't marry anybody darker than you.
Well, yeah, we all know that.
Yeah, and again, back to your point about the darker the skin, the more under attack you are.
We are.
When we look at the populations who are incarcerated, they're more dark-skinned black males.
Always. That's always the case. That's that's an extension of the system.
Yeah, and we look at the dynamics oftentimes during the enslavement phase of the system of white supremacy on the plantation. We saw the same thing play out, and that presents an opportunity for those who classify themselves as white, who practice racism, to leverage those differences and distinctions and give a little bit more here and a little bit less there, or try to use that skin in coloring as a weapon against us, and to convince us that you're a little bit better because you're a little bit lighter.
Yes. But that comes from white supremacy itself. Also, I wanted to say before we have to leave, there are a lot of times there are black people who say who are accused of being racist. Would you speak to that?
Oh no,
because I always say there's no way a black person can be racist.
Exactly, because there's only one functional type of racism, and that's white supremacy. And so it's a system, and the qualifications for being a racist,
it's a power term.
Being a white supremacist, you first have to be white.
There are no black supremacists.
No,
anywhere.
No, and it doesn't really matter what a black person says, even if they stand on top of the table and jump up and down and shout bad things about white people. That white person is not going to not get a job or not get a mortgage or not get into college or be denied promotion or even be harassed on the street when they're barbecuing or if they're just walking into their apartment or whatever the case.
Yes. We're just about out of time, but we've been talking with Sabrina Johnson. She is the host and director of the Crest-Western Institute. And so what would you say, Sabrina, in closing words to people who may be watching, and also quickly about the Institute and where we meet?
Okay. Well, first of all, the Institute meets, again, the second Thursday of the month at 7 p.m. at Howard University's Blackburn Center in the Forum Room from September through June. And we invite you to come. Join us for further discussion and problem solving. And also, I would like to urge everyone to, yes, purchase the ISIS papers, but also tune into talktainmentradio.com, talktainmentradio.com. On Wednesday mornings from 9 to 11
Mr. Fuller.
a.m., Mr. Fuller is the
Fuller.
featured speaker on the compensatory hour. And also, his website is producejustice.com. And you can get a copy of the United Independent Compensatory Code System concept book.
Thank you very much. Sabrina Johnson of the Crest-Western Institute. This is Poet Danny Queen. This is Color Me Poetry. Until next time, color me poetry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Peace.
Am poetry.
I am the living experience. I am the lifelong proof. Color me the poetry of nothing but the truth.
Color me a love child lost in the promised land. I am a poem for black hearts.